Good afternoon. This is Bob Clemmy. Thank you for joining our situation assessment for the fireworks industry. We are going to be reviewing a situation report that was issued 2 days ago. It is currently September 24th at about 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to just play this out. Every month, we're going to do an update to this report covering different aspects of the fireworks industry. Part of why this is interesting to me is we're leading up to America's 250th anniversary next year, where fireworks are likely to play a key role. But this industry is under a lot of pressure with a lot of their product and imports coming from China, with clearly their product being hazardous and potentially flammable and explosive. So they need to have good operational procedures and training so that people stay safe. Um, it's highly seasonal with almost all of the revenue happening in a very short time period around the 4th of July. So there's a lot going on here. The industry is fairly small. It's about a $2.2 billion industry. I'll be going through some of these details as we go forward. And almost all of the companies are small to mid-sized family-owned organizations. So there's not a lot of public data, and that's been part of what's been both interesting as well as challenging as we go through this. So thank you for joining us. So as we've been doing research on the fireworks industry, a lot of the leaders of the trade organizations that represent the industry have been vocal. They've been meeting with representatives at the White House about the tariffs and the uncertainty of the Chinese negotiations because about 97% of fireworks in the United States are imported from China. And there's very little to almost no production capacity here in the United States, especially for the consumer grade fireworks. So what we're seeing here is kind of a double whammy. On the one side, there's the cost implication where tariffs were at about 5%. They jumped to 145% for a short period of time in April, and then they settled back down to now about 30%. But there's still uncertainty with leaders of both countries still actively meeting, and it's causing a lot of these small to mid-sized companies in the fireworks industry to really be unsure how much product to bring in, how much their prices may need to go up, kind of what their inventory carrying costs are, all the business issues that come with that uncertainty. So it's been interesting to dig into this and understand this industry a little bit more, especially here as we're leading up to a big anniversary celebration next year. So one of the things that I found interesting as I've been looking into this industry more is that it's a very small industry when it comes to large players and large corporations. So none of the big companies are publicly traded. They're all private. Many of them are multi-generational, family-owned companies. And we'll look at some of those names here in another couple of slides. But there's not a lot of public data about these companies, first of all, but they're also relatively susceptible to a lot of these challenges and changes, both on the tariff side as well as what's just their normal cyclicality, where they describe it as a hyper seasonal industry, where about 90 plus percent of their revenue comes in about 3 days during the 4th of July, which I had never heard of an industry being that cyclical before, that seasonal. So we're seeing that there's pressure on this industry. And Julie Heckman, who is the executive director of the American Pyrotechnic Association, says that this is going to start squeezing companies out and force some consolidation. So this starts to become a pretty significant market force that's going to change the face of this industry, whether it's this year or next year, but it's creating, for me, a strategic threat, a strategic risk that's been interesting to learn more about. The other thing that's interesting is that the industry is not immune to innovation and threats from competitors. So drone shows are becoming a much more prevalent and requested type of show by municipalities, especially in the western states where drought conditions are a concern and wildfires are certainly an issue almost every year. Some of the cities and counties in Colorado in particular don't do fireworks shows anymore. They have changed to these drone shows where they'll have 100, 300, 500 or more drones doing all the different formations and um, illustrations in the sky, which gives them kind of a lot of flexibility, and they're actually pretty impressive. And for me, it's kind of a directional question whether drone shows are going to replace or whether they're going to augment, or what kind of impact that's going to have on what's been a long-standing tradition of fireworks here in the United States. So this situation report is going to be fairly short, but the first section I wanted to cover is to go through highlights on market share for the key players. So as we start to look at this slide, understand that these are estimates, and part of the purpose of even putting estimates or rough data on a slide like this, it's dangerous, right? Because it starts to become factual. So my intent is not for this to become factual as much as it is a starting point. And just like with when I was in the business continuity business and helping large organizations respond and manage crisis situations, hurricane maps were something that we focused on a lot during hurricane season. And the hurricane forecasters created something that they call the cone of uncertainty, which gives them the latitude to say, here's roughly where we think this hurricane is going to hit. And each day, each kind of ensuing call that they would have a little bit better information about how accurate they were, or they would shift the direction based on the latest information. So my goal with these situation reports is the same, to start with something to kind of paint that picture forward of roughly what I think the market share looks like. And then as I learn more, as we learn more, as I gather feedback from the market, from industry insiders, to better understand and better define what this market looks like as we go forward. So on the right-hand side, you can see the display revenue for the United States is about $600 million per year, and it's split across a fairly small number of companies. These are the top 5 companies in the United States. They're all small to mid-sized family-owned companies. There has been some change recently with Pyro Spectaculars, which is one of the long-standing, since I think 1860 or so, out in the California market. They recently sold in September of 2024. Um, Ingram Enterprises bought them, and Ingram Enterprises um, has been growing. They also own a consumer-focused company and importer called Fireworks Over America. So we're starting to see the industry consolidation that Julie was referring to. Pyrotechnico, Grucci, Garden State Fireworks here in New Jersey, and Zambelli have all been in this business for pretty close to 100 years, passing their business from one generation down to the next. Many of these companies are at least in their third generation, if not fifth generation of ownership within the same family. And that to me is very interesting as a case study of resilience, right? How is it that these companies, kind of a slice of America, doing these fireworks shows every year, that they've been able to maintain that kind of staying power from generation to generation? Here it's a dangerous product, it's a dangerous activity shooting off these fireworks. It's highly regulated. Clearly, more and more fireworks are being imported from other countries, whether it's China sends a lot of them to us, Spain sends some, Italy sends some. So for me, there's this kind of, as well as some of these companies making fireworks here in the United States still. But to me, it's been very interesting that these companies have been able to withstand and weather the test of time. So the next section of this report is to review the market size. So on this slide, I'm going to start looking at what the volumes of fireworks shows are in the United States. So this was keying off of Julie's starting point, which was that there were about 17,000 fireworks shows on the 4th of July. Right off the bat, this does not um, estimate many shows during New Year's Eve. So there's an enhancement as we go forward on that just for New Year's Eve shows. But what I started to do is to break down the industry based on the size of the show. You can see we've got very small, small, medium, large, extra large shows. And then we have Disney, where Disney does a show at most of its parks here in the United States every single night of the week. So they are by far the largest consumer and user of fireworks in the United States, these display fireworks for big shows. But this is a starting point. Again, it's a way of just estimating from those very small to small shows that are, we'll call them between five and maybe $12,000 for a small to very small show, for a rural or small community that wants to celebrate the 4th of July. Maybe they get sponsorship from the local bank and the insurance companies and the car dealers and folks to help defray the cost so it's not all borne by taxpayers. But you can see a large majority of the fireworks shows in the United States fall into those two buckets, the small and very small shows. The medium and large shows, think about that just being a larger city. So whether it's, a Pittsburgh, whether it's a San Francisco, whether it's, even some of the larger cities, I don't know that they're going to really fall into that extra large bucket. I think that that extra large bucket for me are the Macy's 4th of July shows or the Boston, Esplanade, with 4th of July with the Boston Pops kind of thing, where again, these are nationally televised, or San Diego has a huge fireworks show every year. So there, I'm guessing about 20 of those extra large shows per year. But this just starts to frame and give us a starting point, not just for the number of shows, but for also how many shells are used and what the volumes of shells are for the market. So this slide is information pulled directly from the American Pyrotechnic Association's website. Obviously, I've mapped it over the past 25 years based on the data that they have, and this includes both consumer fireworks revenue as well as the display fireworks revenues for the fireworks shows that we've been focusing on for the situation report. There you can see on the right-hand side in 2024, the $600 million per year for display fireworks shows. The consumer revenue is clearly much higher, 2.2 billion. And you can see that there was a huge jump in the consumer revenue in 2020. That was because of COVID and a combination of, you know, uh, folks having some disposable income available to them, having time on their hands, being kind of cooped up in their homes during the lockdown period, and there being a desire to celebrate and kind of do something locally in their neighborhood or in their backyard. And you can see that the revenue almost doubled from 2019 to 2020. Interestingly, in 2021, it didn't go down. It was still high in 2021, and it hasn't come down a lot since then. So that's been an amazing growth story for the consumer revenue side of the industry here. Similarly, with the blue line, a lot with all the social distancing restrictions, a lot of these display companies had to cancel their fireworks shows, and the towns and communities restricted a lot of those fireworks shows. So they had a pretty significant drop off and then a slow return to uh, kind of a healthy number and even a growing number on the display fireworks show side. So this slide looks at the market with a different lens. This is the quantity of fireworks that are consumed or used here in the United States. So again, we have the blue line representing the display fireworks. You can see that's clearly a pretty flat line over the past 20 or so years. Consumer firework volumes have fluctuated, fairly steady growth over the past 25 years with some fluctuation there around the pandemic. But this starts to also paint that picture of where are the opportunities in this industry, right? Is the display revenue industry going somewhere? Is there opportunity? I was talking about the threat from drone shows. Is that going to put continued pressure on the display companies? Or is there continued migration towards consumer grade products that can be used during these professional shows? And we know that that's been starting to happen. So anyway, this question about the consumer fireworks and looking at it both from a revenue perspective as well as the quantity and volume perspective becomes interesting. So when I was in business school, the good news or bad news is that they taught us how to use spreadsheets. So all of this lovely data that I was able to gather from the American Pyrotechnics Association flowed into a nice spreadsheet and starts to flow into these little charts. So um, what we start to look at here is um, what's that revenue per pound look like? Right? It's kind of that first question that we see with these two numbers, right? The revenue information as well as the quantity information. So you can see that in 2024, the consumer revenue per pound is almost $22 in revenue per pound of fireworks sold. And again, with despite that kind of fluctuation in 2020, that's been progressively going up. It was double what it was about 20 years ago. So that's not a bad thing, but it's hard to know whether that's being driven by the cost or whether that's being driven by consumer demand and increased sales volume and sales opportunity. On the display side, again, that's not been the same trajectory. It's been a much more flat trajectory. There's been some increasing, but again, this starts to peel back the industry and not look at it as one homogenous kind of thing, but to realize that there are two industries at play here. There's the consumer fireworks industry, then there's the display, the professional fireworks industry. And this starts to give us more insights into that. So more fun with spreadsheets and graphs here. But one of the things I wanted to look at was how does the price and the quantity of fireworks, how does that change? How is that, how elastic is that, right? And this is not a pure elasticity equation, but it's pretty similar because it maps the difference of the change in revenue compared to the change in consumption. And you can see that the consumer revenue per pound is the solid line, and the quantity of fireworks is the dotted line. I don't know that I've ever seen a chart that is a mirror image like I've seen with this. What that tells me is that consumers are extremely sensitive to price changes. Um, to the point that if the price goes up, they won't buy fireworks. Or they go in with a set budget to buy $70 or $200 worth of fireworks, or even $2,000 worth of fireworks. But if the prices are higher, they won't buy as many fireworks. So it's been really interesting, again, just from a kind of business MBA perspective, to see this kind of elasticity on the consumer side of the market. We'll look at the display side next. So on this slide, we look at the same information for the display fireworks industry. It's not quite as dramatic as what we saw on the consumer side, but we see the same elements where there's a near mirror image between price change and the quantity of fireworks consumed. So again, the spikes and the kind of changes around COVID and 2020, 2021 are probably to be expected just based on all of the uncertainty with shows canceled and inventory that was still purchased and kind of brought on site to prepare for the shows. But again, for me, this is just a way of peeling back the industry to better understand how sensitive it may be to price changes, especially now as a lot of these companies are facing price uncertainty as we go into the 250th celebration next year. So as I mentioned, this situation report is a fairly short one, focused on kind of the high level, well established market size and facts that are available from the American Pyrotechnic Association, along with some of my estimates for market share and market sizing for the display industry. But my goal is to do an update to this report every month, focusing on different aspects of the industry. So let's talk about next steps. All right, so next steps. So we'll update this situation report in October, probably in that second to third week time frame, and we'll have a call, just like we're doing now, to give folks in the industry a chance to ask questions, to provide feedback. Again, I'm not purporting to be the new expert on fireworks, right? My goal is to create a forum, to have a place where people can come together to ask questions, to get insights, and for us to collectively get smarter together. So we'll be doing those monthly calls until probably August of next year. I want to carry it through the 4th of July and then probably have a recap after the 4th to see how things went. And I'm looking forward to learning a lot and getting to know folks in this industry and seeing how we can best support the country as we want to celebrate for next year. A lot of this information is going to be provided online at the Strategic Resilience Center. The goal there is, again, for us to put this information out, for folks to react to it and talk more about it. So that's my purpose here, and look forward to people joining me for the ride. Thank you. This situation report was brought to you by the Strategic Resilience Center.